High above the jungles of Vietnam, the iconic jets carved their names into history. One was a roaring, twin-engine beast, the American F-14 Phantom. The other, a needle-shaped rocket, the Soviet-built MiG-23. When they met in the sky, it wasn't just a dogfight. It was a clash of titans, East versus West, technology versus instinct, strategy versus survival. The pilots had only seconds to decide who lived and who fell. When the United States first entered the skies over Vietnam, its air doctrine was built on the optimism of the missile age. Military engineers and strategists believed that guns were obsolete, relics of a past era of warfare. The mighty F-14 Phantom reflected this philosophy perfectly. It arrived in theater carrying only missiles, the radar-guided AIM-7 Sparrow for long-range engagements and the heat-seeking AIM-9 Sidewinder for closer encounters. Conspicuously absent was an internal cannon. The thinking was simple: future air combat would be fought from a distance, with pilots firing missiles beyond visual range. But the North Vietnamese Air Force had different plans. Supported by a sophisticated network of ground-controlled intercept, or GCI, stations equipped with powerful Soviet radar, they turned their MiG-21s into highly effective hit-and-run assassins. Their strategy wasn't to achieve air dominance by sweeping the skies clean. Instead, their goal was disruption. They aimed to inflict losses, break up American strike packages, and force the powerful U.S. aircraft to jettison their bombs before reaching their targets. The U.S. Air Force and Navy soon realized this was not the war they had trained for. Their enemy wasn't flying blind. On the contrary, every MiG-21 pilot had a dedicated controller on the ground guiding them with precise vectors, altitude, distance, and angle of attack. This created a deadly synergy between the pilot in the air and the radar operator on the ground. The MiGs would often remain hidden, flying low to avoid detection, until their ground controller guided them into a perfect ambush position, usually behind an unsuspecting American formation. They would appear fast, launch their heat-seeking missiles, and disappear just as quickly, leaving chaos in their wake. Let's look at the jets themselves, because they were a study in contrasts. The F-14 Phantom was huge, heavy, and immensely powerful. It weighed in at over 58,000 pounds when fully loaded. It was powered by two massive General Electric J-79 engines that produced a thunderous roar and a signature trail of black smoke. This brute force allowed it to carry a staggering arsenal of missiles, bombs, and rockets. It was a true multi-role fighter, a jack of all trades. Inside the cockpit sat the crew members, a pilot in the front seat, focused on flying the aircraft, and a radar intercept officer, or RIO, in the back, managing the powerful but complex radar system and weapons. The MiG-21, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. It was a masterpiece of minimalist Soviet-designed lightweight, simple, and built for one purpose: interception. With a single powerful engine and sharp delta wings, it looked like a dart. It didn't need to carry a heavy payload. It just needed to accelerate, climb rapidly, strike, and escape. It was a point defense fighter, a scalpel to the Phantom's sledgehammer. While the Phantom relied on its advanced radar and the teamwork of its two-man crew, the MiG-21 relied on the pilot's raw skill, instinct, and the crucial guidance from the ground. One was a technological marvel, the other, a pure fighter. The reality of combat quickly exposed the flaws in American strategy. Early on, the rules of engagement often forced U.S. pilots to visually identify their targets before firing. This completely negated the Phantom's main advantages beyond visual range radar and AIM-7 Sparrow missiles. MiG-21 pilots expertly exploited this limitation, using their small size and ground control to get in close and turn a long-range missile fight into a knife fight in a phone booth. To make matters worse, the early missiles were notoriously unreliable. The AIM-7 Sparrow had a high failure rate. It would often fail to guide, lose its lock, or simply fall off the rail. The AIM-9 Sidewinder, while more reliable, still required the pilot to get into a very specific firing position behind the enemy jet. Pilots found themselves having to get dangerously close to the nimble MiGs, right where the MiGs wanted them. At once in a turning dogfight, the Phantom's biggest weakness became glaringly obvious: it had no gun. MiG pilots knew this and would try to lure the heavier Phantoms into a slow-speed turning battle, where the MiG's superior agility could be used to its full advantage. A Phantom that lost its energy in a turn was a vulnerable target. American pilots pleaded for guns, and eventually, Phantoms were fitted with external gun pods. But these were a clumsy solution. They created drag, and the vibration from firing was so severe that accuracy was terrible. The air war over Vietnam was a brutal teacher, exposing every single weakness in both technology and doctrine. By 1967, after suffering significant losses, the U.S. Air Force desperately needed a win. They needed to turn the tables on the North Vietnamese MiGs. Enter Colonel Robin Olds, a legendary World War II ace and the commander of the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing. He devised a brilliant and audacious plan named Operation Bolo. The plan was a masterclass in deception. American F-14 Phantoms would mimic the flight patterns, call signs, and electronic signatures of the slower, bomb-laden F-105 Thunder to Strike aircraft. The goal was to lure the MiG-21s into the air, making them believe they were scrambling to intercept a vulnerable bombing raid. The bait was taken. The North Vietnamese Air Force scrambled its MiGs, expecting to find easy targets. Instead, they flew straight into a sky full of F-14 Phantoms armed to the teeth and spoiling for a fight. The trap was sprung. In a furious air battle that lasted less than 15 minutes, 7 MiG-21s were shot down with no American losses. Operation Bolo was a stunning success and a huge morale boost. It forced the North Vietnamese Air Force to completely rethink its tactics and grounded their MiGs for several months. The war was far from over, but the hunters had just become the hunted. The dogfights from this era became the stuff of legend. One Phantom crew recalled the terrifying sight of a MiG-21 flashing past their canopy at nearly Mach 1, pulling turns that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The entire engagement, from first sight to the MiG's escape, lasted only 40 seconds, but for the crew, it felt like an eternity. Another crew described firing all 4 of their Sparrow missiles at a single MiG. Every single one missed. In a desperate last-ditch maneuver, the pilot jammed the throttles into full afterburner, ducked towards the ground to gain speed, and finally forced the MiG to overshoot, narrowly escaping with their lives. Survival was never guaranteed. It all came down to skill, teamwork, and sometimes sheer luck. The brutal lessons learned in the skies over Vietnam led to a revolution in American air combat training. The military realized that technology alone was not enough. Pilots needed to be masters of dogfighting, trained not just in theory, but in actual combat maneuvering. Out of this realization, the U.S. Navy Fighter Weapons School, famously known as Top Gun, was born. Its mission was not to test new technology, but to perfect the art of air combat. The focus was on tactics, precision, and pushing both pilot and machine to their absolute limits. As these new training methods took hold, the kill ratios for American pilots improved dramatically. By the end of the war, the F-14 Phantom and the MiG-21 had both secured their places as icons of the jet age. But their legacy wasn't just about the machines themselves, the thrust of their engines, or the sophistication of their radars. It was about the incredible courage, skill, and determination of the pilots who flew them into battle, high above the jungle, where history was written at the speed of sound.